stage pass across to Dr. Ellie Georgiadou, who is the chair for the morning session. Thank you, Ellie. This stage pass across to Dr. Ellie Georgiadou, who is the chair for the morning session. Thank you, Ellie.
Ellie, you're on mute. Can everybody hear Ellie, or it's only me that I cannot hear her at all?
No, we can't hear Ellie, unfortunately.
Ellie, you are on mute.
I think that, Ellie, are you? No. In which case, we'll actually go straight on into the keynote, please.
Okay, all right. I hope Ellie will be able to sort the problem. Not untypical of online presentations. Good morning, everybody. I will start straight away with my presentation. So I'm Stylianos Hatzipanagos. I'm a fellow at the Center for Online and Distance Education at the University of London. And also I have responsibility for supervising computing projects at the Open University. And this concerns undergraduate students who are carrying out, completing the end of degree computing projects. So just to give you some context about my role and my interests before I move on. So an overview of the talk, and Ellie, please let me know when if I go over the time. So I'll give you an overview of the talk. The talk concerns an investigation of academic integrity. And there are two perspectives there. One is security, and the other is assessment design. I think both are very important. It has to do some literature sets which took place in the context of the projects I'm going to refer to and mention. Projects that took place or have been taking place at the Centre for Online and Distance Education at the University of London. And then I will talk about the relationship between AI and assessment. And there is a strong relationship at the moment. For some people, quite a concerning relationship. And in the second part of my talk, I will focus on assessing STEM students and what this means for AI and what this means for the future of assessment in higher education. As I said, quite a concerning period because there are all these issues, and assessment in higher education, my view, is in a phase of transition towards something better, I hope. And I will finish my talk with some solution and set some priorities which I think are important for the future. So let's start. So there's been a crisis in assessing students in higher education. I think it started in 2020 with the pandemic. And so we know why, because quite a lot of institutions, a big majority of institutions had to move rapidly to online assessment. Quite a lot of these institutions were not prepared for that. The other background to the crisis had to do with AI, particularly generative AI, and I will talk briefly about generative AI, differentiating it between between AI, Gen AI. So, what was the impact of the crisis? The impact of the crisis has been phenomenal. There was an increase in academic integrity offenses, and also a secondary but very important aspect, there was grade inflation. Now, assessment. Just put in some context within the talk. I'm gonna continue discussing. So, assessment is very important as a pedagogical focus in what we do with our students. And it seems there is a new focus on assessment. And while my talk continues, I will explain why this is the case. But it goes back to fundamental questions, which we've been asking for a very long time. We haven't been asking them recently. One has to do with how does assessment work? What is assessment for? Why are assessing our students? The perennial differentiation between assessment for learning and assessment of learning. And also something which is quite fundamental, a reform of assessment, which is taking place at the moment in higher education. Going further to academic integrity. Why the focus on academic integrity at the moment for some time now? Of course, the COVID-19 impact, as I mentioned, the impact of generative AI, also changing meanings of academic integrity. I think that's quite important because there is an enhanced definition at the moment of what we mean when we talk about academic integrity. And also some changing solutions to the perceived challenges. Going to a core definition of academic integrity, which has to do with characteristics and values that we would like to instill in our students. So there is honesty, trust, fairness, respect, responsibility, and courage. All very important in the context of higher education. Briefly, as a footnote, what Gen AI is. So generative AI is the class of AI models that they create new content like text, images, music, or other data by learning patterns from data on the web, for instance. Unlike traditional AI, that's where the differentiation is. Traditional AI focuses on analyzing data, and generative AI models are designed to generate data that stem from the examples they were trained on. Before I embark on tell you about the findings of two key projects we run at the University of London at the Centre for Online Distance Education, one has to do with the longitudinal evaluation that took place between 2020 and 2024. And the idea was to evaluate the student experience of assessments, mainly exams, at the University of London. The instruments we used were surveys, interviews. The target stakeholders were students, examiners, program directors, the regional teaching centers all over the world, operational assessment colleagues, it's also the senior leadership. Just to give you some context again, we are talking about distant learning students, a study all over the world, a significant number of them. And the other project I'm going to draw from was called Managing Academic Integrity. And the scope was to investigate academic integrity from the perspectives of security, the also assessment design. So there was a literature search, a substantive literature search. We looked at some contemporary commercial solutions that claimed they enhanced the academic integrity aspect when they were used, and also had interviews with academic program directors and professional staff. So the literature review investigated things like the meanings of academic integrity, what we mean by academic dishonesty, student behaviors, how we prevent academic dishonesty, the purpose and the role of assessment in the new environment, regulation, legislation, penalties, and associated policies, detection through technologies, and also the impact of generative AI. So, what we found in this literature review, the thing we asked was, why do students commit academic offenses? And the overall context was their environmental and individual factors. The environmental factors have to do with the environment the students operate in. For instance, somebody who's taking a remote exam, it's an environmental factor. An individual factor is quite complex as well, because it has to do with things like cultural aspects, people's perception of what academic integrity is, of what is acceptable to do when somebody completes an assessment. And we looked at how academic conduct is managed in higher education. And there seem to be two key categories. One has to do with punitive approaches. So we offer academic integrity courses to educate students on integrity. You may wonder why I put that under punitive, because there's an educative kind of aspect in that. Because quite a lot of these integrity courses quite often focus on the repercussions of student cheating. What will happen to somebody if they cheat? In the punitive kind of aspect also, we had detecting academic dishonesty through technology, and also there was a whole context of regulation, legislation, and penalties. Now, in terms of educative management of academic conduct, student engagement was key. Create awareness and train staff and students on the affordances of technology, and this applied quite a lot in the context of generative AI. And also, there was an educative aspect there as far as the academic committees were concerned, in revisiting processes and related policies. A key message that was very close to our heart was creating a culture where honesty is valued and where students do not cheat, not out of fear of getting caught, but because they choose not to, after reflecting on how they to approach assessment and discussing their values. So, why do students commit academic offenses? From my investigation, it seems that quite often, particularly in the national context, it has to do with insufficient knowledge of English language. Demographic-wise, it seems to be younger rather than older students, undergraduates rather than postgraduates. There is a lack of clarity as far as they're concerned about what plagiarism is and what was expected of them. Stress is a big component. But I highlighted, I put in bold something which is phenomenal, fundamental, and this has to do with the design of the assessment itself. So our claim from this investigation was that the design of the assessment itself was a major trigger that caused an increase in academic offenses in the new context of online assessment. AI in assessment. So there are opportunities there and challenges. The opportunities to enhance learning, teaching, and assessment. There is a big threat to academic integrity, as I mentioned. And also there is a complexity of what is appropriate, what is ethical use of AI. So from this longitudinal evaluation I was talking about, just to give you some snippets of our data analysis. So for instance, we asked students about the use of assessment. At the moment, in 2023, ChatGPT was a key player. Things have evolved since. There's a bigger variety, a bigger repertoire of AI tools at the moment. And a significant number of them, 85%, knew what ChatGPT was. And when we asked them if they saw ChatGPT as a threat or as an opportunity, 46% approximately regarded it as an opportunity. But there's quite a big number, quite a big percentage of agnostic students, 34.5%, they didn't know whether this ChatGPT represented a threat or an opportunity. In 2024, this year, we asked them to we asked them their opinion about the value of AI. So we asked them, do you think that the universities should help students, should educate students to help them to use AI in the following activities? And one aspect was for exam preparation. The other aspect was in the exam content. And we asked them whether they would be happy for the university to do that for exam preparation or the exam content, or for none of the above. So this is the trend in this longitudinal evaluation for 2024, as far as the use of AI is concerned. We also looked at staff perceptions, and staff highlighted policy, regulatory challenges, and I will talk about that in a moment, about the scaffolding of policy, regulatory considerations that either exist or unfortunately do not exist to support staff when they deal with AI. Assessment policy frameworks, again in the same context. Emerging trends that have to do with new tools. Concerns and reluctance in adopting AI detection tools. So there was quite a lot of the people, quite a lot of members of staff we talked to. I'm talking about program directors and tutors that were reluctant to adopt AI detection tools for lots of different reasons. And all of that had an impact on academic integrity. There was an agreement about that from the members of staff we talked to. So we also ran some staff focus, some focus groups with staff, and we asked them the same question, whether AI presents learning and teaching opportunities in their program. And staff perceptions were mixed. So 30% said yes, definitely, and 35% yes said yes, possibly. A significant number, about almost 1/3, they were not sure about it, and only a 5% they indicated probably not. Some student comments or staff comments from this evaluation. I'm not going to read them out. I will give you some time to have a look at it. Is mixed in terms of attitudes to AI. some of it has to do with employment opportunities, how students are worried about how AI is going to affect the world of employment. The staff comments had to do as well as some trends the comments have said that quite a lot of people had hunches sometimes that students were using AI to put together assignments and while taking exams. However, particularly the assignments, they were not really sure how to deal with that. They didn't have a method, a certain method, a sure method to move from the hunches to getting an objective evaluation that AI was used in the students' work. So, what about the findings of this project? Was that there is a change in perceptions of integrity under the recent development. There is this element of trust and culture of trust I talked about. So this is central, building a culture of trust with our students. Redesign assessments came up as a key theme, as a core to supporting academic integrity. There was an agreement that assessment policy was lacking behind development. It was not keeping up with changes and threats to integrity. This had to do with universities being a bit reluctant and slow in putting in place policies to support students and staff when it came down to academic integrity. But everybody agreed that it was a key finding that Gen AI applications are transfiguring many aspects of learning and teaching, and of course, including assessments. Concerning outcomes that we had little evidence that student views had been taken into account over the recent period about academic integrity. So this kind of contradicted in one of the previous findings about the element of trust between students and staff. And a big caveat there was that if we don't involve students in this kind of discussion, how we are going to build this element of trust. I'll move on to discuss challenges and opportunities in STEM assessment. So the previous investigations we talk about the two big projects, the longitudinal assessment at the University of London and also the academic integrity project, did not focus specifically on STEM students. STEM students were participated, and data was collected from their experiences. What I'm doing here is I'm looking at some challenges and opportunities in STEM assessment. So there is a key theme there of cheating and plagiarism with AI tools, and this affects STEM subjects because STEM subjects have particular characteristics. When I'm talking about STEM, I'm talking about foundational STEM skills like problem solving, programming, data analysis, and there seems to be a challenge to use AI tools by our students in order to demonstrate how they achieve these skills. Also, there are other new skills. So I'm talking about an AI digital literacy that is emergent. And this has to do with new skills that we expect our STEM students to acquire. And this has to do with a knowledge and understanding of how machine learning works. It has to do with the knowledge of data science, its implications for student and learning. And it has to do with something that become more than emergent, which is computational thinking. Authenticity and integrity in assessment. So there seems to be a relationship between authenticity and integrity. And this is the first time I'm using authenticity, the notion of authenticity in this talk. But I think it's fundamental when we deal with academic integrity issues. So authenticity, creating assessment which is contextual and which is very relevant to the student's context, to the student's situation, is a key aspect of dealing with academic integrity issues. Another challenge is over-reliance on AI for learning. This is a challenge, and this is a risk we are facing at the moment as AI tools become prominent in how our students deal with learning. So they use AI for exploring subject materials. They use AI potentially to put together assignments, to find answers to the questions. And of course, we realize the risks and dangers of that. Another aspect, again, I'm coming back to the issue of redesigning assessment, and also to the new context of digital literacy in the new AI landscape. The next thing I'm going to talk about has to do with bias in AI tools used for assessment. So you may wonder what I mean about that. By that, I mean that AI tools can introduce bias when we assess creativity, higher order thinking. This is quite significant, I think. Assessing AI-generated content, and that's a big issue we have as educators. How do we do that? Do we have the digital literacies to do that? Are there university structures? Are the university policies that support us in doing that? Evaluating AI-driven projects. Again, it has to do with academic integrity. So, but also it has to do with the changing of assessment. It has to do with assessments where we encourage our students to use AI. So AI becomes an inherent aspect of a STEM assessment. Equity and how students use AI. And I think that's a very big issue, particularly in the context where I looked at, where it's University of London students all over the world. So it applies to all disciplines, but of course it applies to STEM, because STEM disciplines quite often embrace new technologies, and there are expectations from people to use advanced technological skills. So there is a digital divide as far as AI use is concerned, and that's quite concerning about our students' ability and access to these tools to use when they deal with AI. Keeping up with AI advancements, and this does not affect our students only. I think it mainly affects us as educators, and is a difficult challenge. There's an opportunity for there to use this challenge in order to update our assessments, redesign assessments. Finally, developing ethical and critical thinking about AI. This is fundamental, the ethical aspect, how we embed in our teaching discussions about the ethical use of AI, and how we help our students to engage with discussions like that, again, from these discussions. So, the next thing I'm going to talk about has to do with preserving academic integrity when assessing STEM students. And I think there are some approaches there that are useful and can help us to set up assessments and mark assessments related to STEM students. So there are a few different methods. they have to do with leveraging technology to ensure integrity, encouraging collaborative learning, the clear communication of academic integrity policies and regulations. It has to do with monitoring and adjusting remote assessment. And something I didn't talk about at length has to do with the technology used for that, which has to do with proctoring systems and has to do with live proctoring or AI proctoring. And these tools can be controversial. Can be controversial because quite a lot of our students have real concerns about these tools invading their privacy. There's an element of privacy, confidentiality there. However, I'm not against them, and I think they can play an important role in dealing with some academic integrity issues. Not on their own, because if we focus on them exclusively, then we are moving to a situation where punitive aspect of dealing with academic integrity becomes prominent. So I'm talking about monitoring just remote assessments. For instance, this applies to distant learning students in combination with redesigning assessments. Building a culture of integrity, this is important. I refer to that briefly. Ethical use of AI tools in learning and assessment, so engaging our students in discussions about what is ethical use of AI tools. And also a good method, I think, has to do with randomized follow-up assessments. And there is discussion about how logistically possible it is for us to be running these randomized follow-up assessments. A good example of that is oral examinations that return to the assessment that somebody completed, and having discussions with our students about the approaches and the methodology they use when they completed an assignment. And this is a good randomized follow-up approach in order to deal with academic integrity issues. So, in conclusion, I think there are 4 key aspects of how to deal with academic integrity in STEM assessments. One has to do with effective assessment design, redesigning our assessments to include elements of authenticity, and also to think about whether AI needs to be an explicit component of the assessment content, either this is an exam or if it's an assignment. Technology tools. So there is a variety of technology tools and we need to use them, taking into account though any issues that our students can have, any concerns they have about privacy and confidentiality. There is an element of ethical education we need to focus on for our students to appreciate how to use AI in an ethical manner. Updating policies. This is a strong, very message, and I think this is something that still higher education, as far as I know, and in my view, is lagging behind. Updating the policies and creating the context of the framework for our students and for our staff to proliferate and to do well. So, some of the trends we are looking at the moment at this work that I and colleagues of mine at the Center for Online Distance Education at the University of London are looking at is we are looking at a situation where the tendency to balance demands for academic integrity and educational outcomes drives these institutions sometimes to cycles of evolution, and regression. So without putting a negative connotation to any of these 3 aspects, revolution, evolution, and regression, it seems that quite often institutions follow a radical update of their assessment. Sometimes they evolve under the pressure of reality, and sometimes they regress back to, in quotation mark, tried and tested approaches. For instance, return to exam centers and get rid of online assessment because they're worried about academic integrity. Managing inequalities in educational outcome is exacerbated by AI, and this is a priority. It's a trend, and we need to deal with that in higher education. And of course, something that we understand why it is important, need for ongoing research and also reflective practice. So, moving towards the end of my presentation, the three key themes that I touched on, one had to do with Gen AI and teaching and learning strategies. How do we develop this? Gen AI and academic integrity. How concerned are we, or how concerned should we be? Also, generative AI and learning outcomes. How do we integrate the two without risking any of the pedagogical approaches in how we teach and assess for students? This presentation was based on 4 initiatives. I mentioned a couple of these, and some of them are ongoing at the moment, like the longitudinal evaluation. And there's a new ongoing project I'm involved in that has to do with integrating AI in learning, teaching, and assessment. And finally, I would like to open the floor for any questions. And the final slide has to do with some references on the work. It's collaborative work that I'm involved in with colleagues from the University of London. Going back to questions. Thank you for your time. And I understand that Margaret suggested that I stop sharing so I can have a look at the chat function. I'm sorry, I didn't have any time to have a look at that with the presentation because of the slide setup. Thank you for your time. And
I'm going to try to at least thank you, Stylianos. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Very good.
Now you can hear me because I have both machines on. One machine has audio and the other has video.
Okay.
So
Echo.
I'm really sorry because
don't worry about it. We'll sort it on the next break.
Obviously, people may have seen it, but it shows you have your finger on the pulse. And I'm very grateful for this presentation. I'm so sorry I couldn't introduce you properly. But I have some questions myself, but I will wait for the others to ask you first. Also, Gordon, I think, is going to monitor.
Yeah, and there are some questions in the chat function. So let's start with the first one, Neil. Margaret was asking whether there will soon be easy to use software to identify to what extent AI was used by students. The prognosis is not great as far as I'm concerned. There is, as you know, there was Turnitin, and Turnitin has a plugin to which many institutions declined to use because they don't think was up to scratch. There are some other tools. There is a tool called ChatGPT Zero, which is a bit controversial and not very reliable as far as I'm concerned. So there are some tools out there. It's work in progress. It's the transition I was referring to. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I can see at the moment, there aren't any good, any totally reliable tools to help us to assess whether AI has been used for our students. I think there is still this gap between the hunch we have as educators. I read something and it looks suspiciously as AI, and how I concretize, to put it this way, this hunch into something that I can take further to a regulatory committee. So things are changing very fast. So it's a difficult question to answer, I think, but not at the moment, as far as I can tell.
Yes, like you, I think we use Turnitin at Hull, but that has an option for an AI detector. But
Yeah.
because of the ethics of using that for students, and as you say, they're not very reliable still. We're not enabling it. But yeah, this is going to be a challenge. So yeah, and the next question, I think was from Ellie, about how we encourage the students to use AI. But if we do that, how do they attribute or cite the sources?
Okay, that's a big challenge. But Ellie, you identified a brilliant approach on how to integrate AI in assessment by encouraging our students to talk about the use of AI in a particular assessment. And quite a lot of these assessments, the new type of assessments that come across, and I think they're innovative, encourage the students to use AI, but they need to declare the use of AI, and they need to identify how they used AI in a creative fashion without just generating content. So I think this is a good way to go, a good methodology to encourage our students to use AI by asking them to declare the use of AI and asking them to discuss how AI was used and how they evaluate what AI has given them, for instance, because there are all these famous AI hallucinations. So a skill I would expect from my students would be to be able to identify these hallucinations of AI and say, I did some AI generation, and what I came up with was totally rubbish. So I rejected it because it was not up to scratch. Does this answer your question?
Yes, yes. Of course, it's a conundrum. I'm thinking that everything has to be viva, like we do for PhDs.
Yeah, yeah. Logistically, it's a problem.
But it's a question of resources.
Yeah, it's a question of resources. Can you imagine having a cohort of 200 students and to do
400 in my case.
Yeah, 400 in your case. Yeah.
I used to have 400.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was another question from Anita. Would you expect the tool to just identify if AI had polished the final version or the driving force behind the idea? Yes, I would ideally like to see a tool like that, Anita, and it would be really, really helpful to monitor and assess the extent to which our students use the AI. Quite often, students would use AI in order to rewrite a sentence, for instance, with which they are not happy. And I think this is almost depends on how we feel about it. It's almost an acceptable way of using AI, but it's a more acceptable use of AI, in my view, rather than tell ChatGPT to produce a short essay on this particular topic. So I don't know if this answers your question. Yes, I think AI detection tools in the future should differentiate between these two aspects. And this will be very helpful for us as educators.
Another question from Margaret, which follows on from that, and something I'm going to say is that scalability. If we do use lots of mini vivas as assessment, which takes up time, do you think that will alter how we teach other things? So to make time for vivas, you could teach less and I think it will change the way that we assess generally with
Yeah.
explanations.
I think it points towards a very, very important, very good approach in integrating assessment fully without teaching. So assessment become of the part of the learning teaching process. So these vivas are not punitive vivas to punish our students if they cannot come up with the questions, become part of the learning teaching process and become part of the of what they do in order to learn. And is the way to go, because for logistical purposes, integrating fully oral examinations or any other methods like that will tip the balance of what we do as educators, and logistically it's not possible to do otherwise. So integrating this additional assessment methods is a good idea, not just for logistical purposes, but also because they create some interesting situations in the learning journey of our students. I don't know, Margaret, if I answer your question.
Yes, I think actually I agree. But do you think we might then have to go back into formal examinations for the other part of the assessments?
Yeah, and that's a controversial topic, isn't it? And I know that quite a lot of educators have very strong views about the use of exams in higher education, how good, how valid they are. I don't see exams as in this black and white differentiation. I think exams is a necessity for quite a lot of projects, quite a lot of programs, quite a lot of students in the distant learning context in which I investigate, for instance. So I think there are ways of improving exams and making them useful and beneficial for our students. I guess it had to do with integrating authentic assessment approaches, even the exam content, avoiding things like multiple choice questions for which the students can find very easily the answer on the web, using some of these technologies, controversial technologies, I must repeat, because quite a lot of students are very worried about privacy, confidentiality, having a proctoring tool and a camera focused on you while you are writing exams. So yes, it's an interesting discussion, I think, and as I said, there are quite a lot of educators that think that exams is not a good way of assessing our students, and also they open the door to academic misconduct issues much more than other forms of assessment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Another question from Ellie about do you think critical thinking and ethics are important in this context?
Yeah, I think so. I think ethics is a fundamental aspect of academic integrity and what we do with AI, and needs to be part of every conversation we have with students. And if our key objective in education is to engender high order thinking and develop critical thinking skills in our students, then we need, as far as AI is concerned, to have this element of ethics, of ethical considerations being part of the context of what we do with those students, asking them to discuss whether it's ethical, for instance, to use AI in a particular manner, what is acceptable for them, what implications there would be for their learning, for instance, for the skills they need to develop in order to do well in the the world of employment. So ethics, the ethical kind of aspect is key there in any discussions we have with them. And also linking it, pairing it with critical thinking and making it clear to our students that an ethical use of AI leads to critical thinking skills, which otherwise they wouldn't probably be able to acquire if they just tell ChatGPT to generate an assignment or come up with a code for a particular program they need to write.
Yeah. A code is good, but if they don't do even a code, you know, it's just copying. Yeah. And not understanding. Dangerous times. Yeah. Okay. So I think we have time.
Have some more time.
We
Any
have
other
time.
questions that people? Any other questions that people might have?
Do you have any questions?
To people?
From
yeah, I
people
would
like
like to. I would
Neil,
like to
I
ask.
mean,
Yeah, I would like to ask colleagues if how do they feel about the new landscape in the context of STEM?
yeah.
Are they happy? Are there positive aspects there? Is there an exciting kind of component, an exciting aspect of using AI in putting together assessments, or it's all doom and gloom, a worry, a concern about what's happening to us, what's happening in the way we assess our students, for instance, and whether we're able to assess our student learning in the new environment. So that would be my question. How do people feel? Are they optimistic, pessimistic, concerned?
Oh, Neil, you are actively teaching.
Yeah, I think it's probably a mix of us feelings, really. It's an opportunity. Again, I'll talk later on. I've got a couple of talks I'm giving. I think it's an opportunity to look at how we teach and what we teach. I think there's a bigger discussion we need on resourcing. Personally, I think we'll need to move away from our current teaching approach and our assessment approach. Probably go back 200 years to how we used to teach and assess at university. It wasn't big lectures, it wasn't exams or big coursework. You worked with a person and you learned from the resources that the university gave you. And after your 3 or 4 years of study, you could write about it and explain that. And I think that's a better way, but it doesn't scale to a class of 400. But again, here at Hull, I've got sort of 20 supervisees spread across 3 years of study. So if I worked with each of them per year and helped them learn, like the old university model, the current university model doesn't scale and won't work with it because the AI is getting so good at creating content. We're using AI in our teaching programming, so Copilot in Visual Studio. A colleague who teaches programming says it's quite hard because he starts using it, it's turned on, he tries to teach students some code, and Copilot suggesting, oh, you're trying to do this, here's the code you need. And he said, well, so he has to turn it off so he can explain what he wants to do before Copilot also fills it for him. But I think some people are looking at the current tools and say, well, I'm not very good at this thing or that thing. But actually, they're so fastly adapting. Oh, equally, the opportunities are good as well. I will talk about it again later on, but one of the papers I'm submitting for this, Margaret, I gave ChatGPT my slide deck on my abstract, and it wrote the paper for me. So it was best for me cutting and pasting from PowerPoint into Word and editing it. It could refactor it for me. It was my words and ideas, but refactored by a tool, but I could then copy edit. So as an academic who's busy, it's a really good tool. If we're transparent and ethical, which goes back to I think your talks, Alios, we need to be very transparent in how we're using it, because it's going to become again, I mean, the new Office and tools, Google tools, Copilot, Bard, Claude, they're built into them. So you
Mm,
start writing a letter, it's a joining a letter, here's what you want.
yeah.
So in the future, it will be as routine as a spell check or grammar checker is today.
Yeah.
And that means what
But,
we're saying.
Yeah. But Gordon, you raised an important issue there, which makes me think that we talk to students about ChatGPT, for instance, and everybody knows what, or quite a lot of our students know what ChatGPT is. However, quite often, we as educators and our students don't know, are not aware that a particular tool you're using beyond ChatGPT has a big AI component in it. And they can use Grammarly, for instance, and some of them don't even know that Grammarly has an AI engine behind it. So they don't take any cautions. They don't think ethically about the use of this particular technology because they think it's another type of Google, old generation Google, pre-AI. So I think there is an issue there. There is a concern for us to how to deal with a wealth of technology, a wealth of support tools for us and for our students, where everything is AI generated. So how we deal with that, how we instruct our students to use them in an ethical fashion.
I think Margaret wanted.
Yeah, thinking, very interested in your point that students might be unwilling to have a camera on if they were doing an examination. Could you expand on this a bit? Because I'm thinking for your distance learning ones, if you wanted to do a viva, and I'm including the PhD vivas, I want to see their face. I want to be fairly sure. I can't guarantee that it's actually, they're still not getting sources of information from elsewhere, but I've got a better of a chance of guessing it. What are your thoughts about this? Because without the camera, it seems a bit risky.
It's quite risky, and impersonation is an issue, particularly in distant learning assessment. Quite a lot of the technological tools, the proctoring tools, require an authentication in the beginning of the process, and which students don't like very much, but it's a necessary component where you deal with distant learning students. So in the context of a viva, this element of impersonation needs to be checked. Otherwise, there is an issue. Anecdotally, I work with students at the Open University. They're very reluctant to turn on the cameras. So quite often, I'm in a big tutorial and everybody has the cameras off. Quite often, there's not even an avatar or a photograph. It's just a blank screen. And I'm not really sure if this is a cultural issue at the moment, that people are not willing to share the face when they participate, communicate with somebody. But I see the issue you're raising, to go back to the serious issue, Margaret, I see the issue you're raising about the use of cameras and technology.
I think this has been a fantastic talk. Thank you. And the points that you raised are brilliant. And thinking back about how long you'd have to do these mini vivas, the effect it would have on the loading on the lecturers would be astronomical.
I think there is a huge logistical issue there. And that's why quite a lot of the approaches talk about randomized vivas.